In 2020, a beach in Somerset surrendered something that shouldn't exist. A jawbone, over 2 meters long, belonging to a predator that would rewrite history. For over a century, fragments like these were dismissed as dinosaurs, simply because they were too massive to be anything else. But we were wrong. This 80-ton juvenile wasn't even an adult. It was a teenager. If a juvenile reached 82 feet, then how large did the king actually grow? The ocean is almost perfect at making things disappear. When an animal this size dies out at sea, it typically just sinks into the dark and gets lost under millions of tons of sediment. Most of the time, that's where the story ends, buried under miles of water. But every once in a while, a storm or a shifting tide brings something back to the surface that we were never meant to see. But to understand the weight of this find, we have to look closer at that morning in Blue Anchor. Justin and Ruby Reynolds were scanning the tide line for shells when a massive, dark shape appeared in the Blue Anchor mud. Clearing the silt revealed something impossible, a jawbone that made a grown man look small. This wasn't just a lucky find. It was a physical challenge to everything we knew about giant life. Initially, the scientific community met these claims with a heavy dose of skepticism. They had seen giant discoveries fall apart under scrutiny before. But the 2020 find wasn't an isolated incident. Back in 2016, a collector named Paul de la Salle discovered a similar piece of massive bone at Lillestock. For years, those fragments had sat in a museum, hidden in plain sight under the generic label of possible dinosaur remains. The location was the first clue. Somerset is famous for land-dwelling dinosaurs, but these bones emerged from the Rhaetian mudflats, ancient deep-sea beds. This mystery actually stretched back even further to a legendary cold case from the 19th century known as the Aust Colossus. Found at Aust Cliff, these fragments were so massive that Victorian scientists simply couldn't conceive of a marine reptile that size, misidentifying them as limb bones from the land. When Dr. Dean Lomax and his team finally connected the dots between Somerset, Lillestock, and the forgotten Aust Colossus, the true scale was undeniable. By scaling the syringular bone against every known marine reptile, the math revealed a 25-meter titan, 82 feet from nose to tail. Even more staggering, fragments from the Aust Cliff suggest some individuals may have pushed toward a 35-meter limit. That is the volume of a blue whale. For 150 years, this ghost remained an enigma, but today it finally has a name: Ichthyotitan. This was the ocean's apex shadow, 80 tons of muscle moving through the lightless depths with the agility of a predator half its size. It's a discovery that breaks the standard rules of biology. In the natural world, being a giant hunter is usually an evolutionary dead end due to the massive metabolic cost. And yet, Ichthyotitan found a way to win. To understand how this monster was even possible, we have to go back 250 million years, to the aftermath of the Great Dying. The Permian extinction had wiped out 96% of marine life. The oceans were a biological vacuum. While the ancestors of T-Rex were just starting to figure out how to walk on land, a small group of reptiles did something radical. They went back to the water. Look at Cardarhynchus. It was barely a foot long. It looked like a lizard with flippers. It was amphibious, awkward on land, and slow in the water. But it had a plan. Within just a few million years, these lizards hit the evolutionary accelerator. They didn't just evolve, they sprinted. Most lineages take 50 million years to reach giant sizes. Whales took nearly 50 million years to become the titans we know today. The ichthyosaurs reached these massive proportions in less than 3 million years, which is essentially an eye blink in geological terms. By the late Triassic, the Shastosauroid family had established total dominance over the open sea. For decades, we viewed these creatures as the gentle giants of their era, suction feeders, much like modern whales, drifting through the water to gulp down squid. But Ichthyotitan redefined that entire lineage. The morphology of its jaw reveals deep grooves for massive muscle attachment, evidence of an animal built for combat, designed to snap shut on struggling prey with devastating force. Think of it like a great white shark, but scaled up to the size of a blue whale. While whales move by flapping their tails up and down, Ichthyotitan was built differently. It had a massive vertical tail that swung side to side, the same high-speed engine that sharks use today. This wasn't just a slow, drifting giant. It was 80 tons of pure muscle designed for the chase, moving through the water with an agility that's almost impossible to imagine for something that big. The vision of this animal was another massive adaptation. In its close relatives, we've found fossilized sclerotic rings, the bones that support the eye, that are the size of dinner plates. These eyes were designed to function in total darkness, thousands of feet below the surface, where the water pressure is high enough to be lethal. It was a level of specialization that allowed it to find prey in the deep ocean that other predators simply couldn't see. This brings us to a major biological challenge known as the blue whale paradox. While the modern blue whale is the largest animal to ever exist, it maintains its massive size through a very specific strategy, filtering millions of tiny krill. They don't have to struggle with their prey, they simply swim through it. But Ichthyotitan lived by a completely different set of rules. It was armed with a mouth full of bladed teeth, meaning it had to hunt, chase, and fight for every single calorie it consumed, just to keep its massive heart beating. Moving an 82-foot body through water creates massive drag. It's like trying to push a Boeing 737 through a swimming pool. To power that kind of movement, you need an engine that runs hot. That's why scientists now believe Ichthyotitan was warm-blooded. Isotope analysis of their teeth and bones shows they maintained a high body temperature, even in cold water. Seriously, think about that. A giant reptile that generates its own body heat, just like us. It likely had a thick blubber layer to trap that heat in the freezing deep. It was a biological furnace. But that came with a price. A warm-blooded engine needs constant fuel. Ichthyotitan wasn't just hunting for fun. It was hunting to keep its internal fire from going out. If it stopped eating, it stopped living. This created a biological arms race. During the late Triassic, the world was a single continent called Pangaea. The Tethys Ocean was a buffet of giant squid, prehistoric fish, and other marine reptiles like the long-necked plesiosaurs. For Ichthyotitan, these were just snacks. Size was the only way to stay safe. If you weren't the biggest, you were dinner. Ichthyotitan didn't just grow to be big, it grew to be untouchable. Evolution pushed the predator template as far as physics would allow. It was the largest macropredator to ever swim in our oceans. No shark, no whale, and no dinosaur ever reached this level of apex status. So let's settle the debate once and for all. Let's put Ichthyotitan in a virtual arena with history's biggest killers. Most of us know Mosasaurus as the heavyweight champion of the Cretaceous, especially given its fame in modern cinema. At 17 meters long, it is a terrifying apex predator. But the reality is, when you place it alongside Ichthyotitan, the perspective changes completely. We are looking at an animal that was 10 meters longer and weighed 80 tons. While a mosasaur might have had the edge in agility, Ichthyotitan operated with a level of pure mass that made it fundamentally untouchable. To put it simply, a single strike from a tail that size would have carried the kinetic force of a high-speed car crash. Then, what about Leviathan, the prehistoric sperm whale with teeth the size of your forearm? It was built to kill other whales. It reached about 17.5 meters and weighed around 50 tons. Now this is a better fight. Leviathan was bulky and smart, but Ichthyotitan still has the mass advantage by 30 tons. It's the difference between a heavyweight boxer and a literal giant. But the comparison that most people want to see is the one with the Megalodon. While the Meg is the undisputed king of sharks, stretching up to 20 meters, with the most powerful bite in history, it was actually operating in a different weight class than Ichthyotitan. Sharks are built for long-term efficiency, but this reptile was an 80-ton engine designed for high-speed power sprinting. In a hypothetical encounter, the Megalodon would have been facing an animal that outweighed it by the mass of 5 or 6 elephants. This is the part that blows my mind. In the entire history of the Earth, only the modern blue whale is physically larger than Ichthyotitan. But remember, a blue whale is a peaceful grazer. Ichthyotitan was a whale-sized animal that was built to eat whales. It occupied a niche in the food chain that has been empty for 200 million years. Nothing since has ever come close to being this big and this dangerous at the same time. But how do we know all this from just 2 jawbones? Well, this is where it gets really incredible. Scientists sliced into the bone to look at the histology, the microscopic bone cells. See, in most giant animals, like dinosaurs or even us, you see something called a lag line. It's like a ring in a tree. It shows when the animal reached adulthood and stopped growing. It's the skeletal speed limit that tells us the animal had finished its development. However, the analysis of the Somerset specimen showed something unexpected. The growth lines were still completely open, meaning there was no lag line to mark the end of its development. See, the implications are staggering. It means that the 25-meter monster Ruby and Justin found wasn't even a fully grown adult. It was essentially a teenager. This individual was still in its rapid growth phase. This is the missing link. It finally explains those impossible bone fragments found at Aust Cliff. If a juvenile reached 82 feet, then the unnamed Aust Colossus might simply be what a fully grown adult looked like. A 35-meter, 200-ton titan. If this individual had lived just another 20 years, it easily could have reached 100 feet in length. We are looking at a biological engine that essentially had no upper limit. As long as the food supply was there, it just kept getting bigger. But as the saying goes, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. 200 million years ago, the environment shifted. The Rift of Pangaea unleashed the Central Atlantic magmatic province, flooding the atmosphere with ash and the oceans with acid. For a high-energy, warm-blooded titan, This was the ultimate ecological trap. As the food web collapsed, the king's greatest strength, its massive size, became its ultimate liability. It was not a sudden impact that ended the reign of the giants, but a slow, quiet starvation. While smaller reptiles survived by hibernating or consuming less, the giant had nowhere to go. It couldn't scale down. It was a victim of its own perfection. What followed was a long and tragic decline. Eventually, the very last of these titans took its final breath and vanished into the dark. And while the ichthyosaur lineage actually survived for another 100 million years, they never reclaimed their crown as giants. They spent the rest of their history as smaller, dolphin-sized hunters, proving that in an environment of constant change, being the biggest animal in the ocean makes you the most vulnerable. The reality is that Ichthyotitan lay hidden beneath a public beach in England for 200 million years, undetected by the millions of people who walked over it. It serves as a stark realization that we've only barely scratched the surface of what still remains buried in the rock, just waiting for the next storm to wash it free. Creating these documentaries is a true labor of love, requiring hundreds of hours to bring these anomalies of evolution back to life. If you want to see more prehistoric mysteries solved, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button for Prehistory On. You are the reason I can keep digging. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the deep.